He'll do.
Okay, good morning. My name is John O'Brien, the Register of Deeds for the Southern Essex County. And I welcome you all here this morning to what I hope will be a very productive motion that I'm filing in the Massachusetts Appeals Court to help my constituent Esther, who has, in my opinion, taken advantage of. I'm going to turn this over to Grace Ross. Grace, you're on.
So Chad, if you can mute each of us when we're not speaking.
Grace, do you know you're muted?
So that again?
Starting all over again. We're getting echo again, Chad. Can you turn his sound
I
off?
can take my sound off.
Not just muted, but off. So we don't get echo. All right. No, we're still getting echo. Sorry.
Some
folks.
people haven't muted their lines.
All right, my name is Grace
Everyone-
Ross, and I'm the coordinator of the Mass Alliance Against Predatory Lending. And we're very excited to be here today. This is kind of a momentous occasion. We've certainly had lots of elected officials who are willing to, help us pass a law or something like that. But we are honored here to have one of the members of our coalition, the awesome Register of Deeds here in South Essex. Salem Registry, and John O'Brien is taking it a step farther and showing people what it could look like to live in a just society where we all stand up for each other and we do the steps that we're all in a position to do of intervening to end the practices of predatory lending that have been purposefully targeted at people of color, women, and immigrants first and worst, as we say in the coalition. So I'm going to turn it over to John to say whatever he's prepared. And if you have a question, please raise your hand. The wonderful, awesome tech person here, Chad, will be keeping track of people with questions. And we're also thrilled to be joined by Esther Ngotho herself, who's struggling a little bit with health stuff, so she may be quieter than her normal self. And we'll pass it along and see how we do. Welcome, good morning, and here's John.
All right, again, thank you all.
I need to see it. I needed to, as a matter of fact, I needed to talk to you.
There we go. Okay, you can hear me now. Again, welcome to
I went
everyone
up there
who
yesterday,
is joining
next
us
door,
this morning.
to pick up something that was on the docket.
As I said earlier, Esther is a
The
constituent of
difference would be
mine
that it has to be
from the town
mailed
of
to the
City of Beverly, and she came to my office
and
and
They're
basically
trying
told
to
me
rush
a horror
through
story.
everything
And
for
I was
the
convinced
house.
after speaking with
And so
Grace
that's why they're
Ross,
doing
who
it.
has been intimately
So
involved in
I'm
this,
wondering if there's
that
any
there's
way
no
that
question that she was
you
set up
and
for
the
failure from day
could,
one
you
by
know,
the lenders and by,
they-
quite
they-
frankly,
they-
others who participated in
they made an
a
order.
scam where her rights were taken away. She came to this country seeking the American dream, and that is
They made
home
an
ownership. Is one of the most important
And he
things that we offer is that people have the right to buy and sell property. In Esther's case, her documents that were recorded in my registry clearly are fraudulent. And when this was all
He
brought
went
to my
on
attention,
and,
this registry is, for most of you
let
probably
the,
know, we've led the way in exposing the big banks for a number of years, and we have robo-signers, we have fraudulent documents that we
execution.
reject
So they rush this
every
thing.
day. This registry will not knowingly record fraud.
So that
So as the case went on and Esther was in the Massachusetts Land Court,
so
I
they're
filed a motion as the elected registrar of deeds, keeper of the records, the person who's responsible for the integrity and the accuracy of those records,
no, yeah.
to intervene in
I
her
have a
case,
feeling if you just
because I was
How you doing?
concerned
just
that a
walk over
court
there, they
would
know the law.
issue
And if
an
they know the
order
law, they won't do that.
ordering me
Uh,
to continue to record fraudulent documents in Esther's case. Needless to say, the land court denied my motion to intervene. And I was extremely disappointed in that, because I think it sent a clear message that they were asking me as the elected registrar of deeds to turn a blind eye to fraud. And that's something that I just will not do. So working with Grace and the attorneys, I drafted another motion to the Massachusetts Appeals Court asking that they remand the case back to the land court and allow me as the elected registrar of deeds, and I might add, as an assistant recorder of the land court, to have my day in court for Esther. But it isn't just Esther that this type of activity is affecting. It's all across the state and all across the country. Hopefully, I will prevail and I will be able to go to the land court and have a hearing and have my say, which is something that everyone should have. And I'm hoping that if that takes place, then people will realize, other elected officials, that we now are going to have an opportunity to stand up and say, we are not going to allow the backbone of this country, which is the land recordation system, to be played by the lenders, by the banks, by anyone who thinks they can come into this registry or any registry and record fraudulent documents to deceive people, to take advantage of people. That has to stop. And it stopped in this registry. And I'm hopeful that today's action, it will stop in other registries. We need to be a team. We need to say, wait a minute. You cannot take advantage of people. You cannot record fraud. This is America. Everybody has a dream. It has to be an equal playing field. This young lady came to this country, and her story is horrific, what was happening. And for the banks to say, we're going to take your house, as they've done so many other times, is wrong. And it's something that I deeply believe in. I understand that there are those out there that will say, you're the register of deeds, record anything that comes in, let the lawyers fight it out. That's not how I operate. If I know it's fraud, if I know that it's fraudulent documents, I'm not going to record it. And I might add that this office just recently had a local constituent of mine who's sitting in jail right now for 2 years, who tried to bamboozle his kids with fraudulent documents. And we sent it to the district attorney, and thankfully John Blodgett, who was the DA, he went forth and prosecuted this gentleman, and he's sitting for 2 years in jail.
All right, let me step in for I need to unmute myself. And you need to mute. Can you mute, John? You got it. All right. I first want to tell people that for some people, they're getting breakthrough from people who are online, and I'm not sure how, because we're not hearing it. But if everybody could please be silent where you are, make sure you're muted, and that your computer sound is off, that really would matter for us. Thank you. First of all, yay, John. To give a little background here, as I had promised, Esther, we looked at her documents, and what we know is that although she, like a number of folks, were targeted with really even worse than many of you who are fighting out there, it is true that what she got bamboozled with was within the range of the horrific stuff we see. And we know that in both federally and at the state level, people have tried in the legislature and occasionally top decisions from top courts to stop all of this. And one of the things that I know John takes to heart are all the decisions that said that registers are not to register deeds that are intentionally racist or I don't know, what would you call it, Christocentric, that have tried to exclude folks who are non-Christian from having deeds, etc. And the registers, I think, have a moral call from almost 100 years now of the registries being used explicitly to be racist, be, as I said, non-Christian, and a lot of other things that you can see in the restrictive deed covenants being abused for a purpose that violates our most fundamental constitutional commitment to each other, that in a constitutional democracy, we're all equal. And no one is to have special privilege rights and have others excluded from what should be a right for everyone equally, and which, not surprisingly, both the state and federal constitution say is true. But what we've found at MAAPL, and if anybody who's interested can let us know, the Northeast Area Conference of the NAACP finally came in with an amicus brief on possibly one of the most important, and in this case, bad decisions from our top court in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, in the New York Bank of Mellon.
Mellon, New York Bank. Yeah.
Mellon Bank of New York.
Wow.
Yes, as trustee versus Alton King. But that brief lays out the real story. I know as a white person raised in this culture, I thought that you go down to your local bank and you get a decent mortgage and you pay it for 30 years and you own the house. What I didn't know, because it's of course not the official story, nobody's been admitting it, is that there was a parallel existence going on, first for African-American men, and then as immigrant men tried to get mortgages, and then finally women, when they were allowed to get credit in their own name in the 1970s, were getting a different story. And that story turns out, now we know from our own Attorney General, Scott Harshbarger's work in the early 1990s, was that money that could get borrowed for homes by those who the official story big banks were not lending to, was purposefully being lended in a way that people would be foreclosed on. They said an average 6 to 7 years, but often in 4 years, where they would overprice a home so that you would find out you were in trouble too late. You wouldn't be able to get out of that loan because you'd now need to borrow money so that you could sell the house, so that you get out from under the bad loan that was priced for more than the house was worth. And it's just obviously a trap, and they knew it, and they milked people for every cent trying to save their home. And it became a intergenerational means to wealth strip. It's still going on now. And what Harshbarger showed us was the official story is that the traditional banks won't lend in neighborhoods of color to women, immigrants, etc. Turns out they were lending. What they were doing was giving money to the very vulture brokers who were lending in those communities and making the money backdoor. without their name on it, without acknowledging the role they were playing. So at some point, we're going to have to expose the revenue stream of how this was done. But as we know in our society, injustice can't continue when those who are in a position to witness and act. And that is what Registrar O'Brien is stepping out to do today, to remind everybody who's in a position to step in and end an injustice, that it's not only your moral obligation and hopefully our obligation as a human community with each other, but also our federal government codified that obligation. And it's in a series of laws known as the Ku Klux Klan Act, was the expression of the 14th Amendment when it was passed into law after the Civil War. And that act has 8 pieces to it. The first one says that everybody has an equal right to property and to live in a home. The second part says everybody has an equal right to contract. Well, anybody who's gotten a mortgage knows that they were told to sign, in most cases these days, an illegal contract that was overpriced. And it was a mortgage, which in Massachusetts transfers part of your deed to another person, whoever is supposed to be lending you the money, which, as I just said, is often not whose name is on it, because they're getting their money from a bigger revenue stream. Anyway, it means that when a mortgage is recorded in a registry, such as this one, it's actually a title deed. It's transferring part of the deed to another person. So it is indeed another deed being used in a racist, sexist, anti-immigrant way in many cases. And as we know from the history of the United States, that when some powerful, wealthy folks figure out how to scam and it works, they then scam absolutely everybody they can get their hands on. And that's what happened here. And that's why we're facing the largest, most long-running foreclosure crisis in the history of the United States. And it's going to be, as always, those who stand behind others for justice, who are going to give us enough power to steer this injustice and get back to what we claim our values have been, but have in fact historically never been carried out, which is the values that everybody has equal rights in this country. And if the registers of deeds, as John called on all the registers to do the right thing, stop enforcing these supposed mortgage deeds that were never legal from day one. But it's, of course, not just the obligation of the registers. There's a lot of players who make this possible, lots of government entities that make this possible. Every enforcement agency that has not thrown its resources behind reversing this 160-year injustice. And every one of us who gets an opportunity to step in and stop this. The 5th and 6th elements of the Ku Klux Klan Act name that it is illegal for 2 or more people to conspire to deny somebody their due course of justice in a state. And the 6th element says, and this is part of John's brief to when he is asking to intervene, which is that if any of us know that 2 or more people are denying somebody else their equal rights in this country, that we have an obligation to act. So for those of you who are wonky enough, you can look up 42 U.S. Code sections 1981 through 88, and I was just quoting 1985 and 1986. But this is an important day for justice, and we hope it's the beginning of a very long trend of the leadership in our state backing the brave and just relentless homeowners who are refusing as best they can to allow themselves and their families and the next generation be run over yet again by these illegal practices. So we're asking folks to step up and back the brave homeowners of Massachusetts who are fighting and continue to fight. I will do a little background information for folks if we want, but John, did you want to?
I just want to make one point. The important
There we go.
Okay, I just want to make one point. The importance of this motion today is the fact that this country is facing economic calamity again. We're seeing it. We're seeing an increase in this registry and registries across the state, if not the country, in banks filing order and notices, which is the beginning of foreclosures. And I am convinced, and by the way, all I'm doing is my job. I'm not doing anything that's unique or anything else. I'm just saying, you know, I'm responsible for this place. And if I know something is wrong, I'm gonna step up and say, it's gotta be fixed. We're gonna see another scam. If it's not already in the works already, they're going to start massive foreclosures again. There's going to be some other plan that Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase and all these banks and these attorneys who are officers of the court who are participating in this and stand before a judge and say, this is legitimate. Well, I can take you out on the floor, which I will, and show you 39,000 complete total pieces of fraud that they've used to sell your mortgage and to take your home. So I'm trying to be a preemptive strike here to say, we're watching this and we're watching patents, and every register in the state and the country should be doing this. And
July,
for me, as an elected official, to be denied the right to intervene, to help a woman in my district, right or wrong, is disgraceful. And I am shocked that the land court did not give me the opportunity to have my day in court.
2 years of injustice.
let me just say that we saw a spike in Massachusetts in July 2022, month over month, an increase in 39% of what they call foreclosure starts, what John just referred to as petitions, a 1 month increase, 39% from, I guess it would have been June of 2022 to July of 2022. So we are in for it if we don't get registrars and the homeowners of Massachusetts understanding that this is a systemic violation and that we have an obligation as a people to stop it and stop it now. Esther, did you want to throw in? Okay, Esther's not feeling great.
That's okay.
Let me say a little background here. So when Esther fled her country to the US, the one thing she knew she really needed was a safe home for her and her daughter. She went to what she was told was a reputable broker, and what the broker gave her was first, they told her she could afford this house, which was overpriced by $200,000 beyond what it was actually worth. They gave her a mortgage and told her that she could spend extra money once the broker found out she had gathered every cent she could get to come into this country. He went, oh, really? Oh, good. And charged her money to do what they call buy down points so that there would be less interest in the long run. That is an illegal act if the points they're charging you initially were illegally high, which is what they did. So they had her buy points, spend down money that she otherwise would have had, when all she was doing was buying it down to what would have been a reasonable interest rate. And then signed her up for a payment scheme that meant that she wasn't really building any equity in the home. But what they did do was, having lied about her income on the form, and these may each seem like outrageous acts, but we cannot tell you how often we see these patterns combined. They set her up to make payments that wouldn't create any equity in the home, but they lied about her income. And we see this a lot. Homeowners should check this on your closing documents if you still have them, and see whether they lied about your income, because those are the documents they sent to whoever the underwriter was. And mostly these small originators are not putting their own money in. They may put their name on the mortgage as the lender, but what they're really doing is they don't care whether Esther can afford to pay it over the long haul, because they're actually creating a really nice package for whoever they're going to have buy the mortgage, or who was really putting the forward the money in the first place. And they don't sign a contract with you for 30 years to pay the mortgage. They don't plan to see you on month 4. They're getting rid of you as fast as they can, and they're lying about what they're giving you, because that's going to allow them to get the money from whoever is actually paying for the mortgage. So it's never been a relationship between you and that lender, because they weren't the lender and they were going to get rid of it in 3 months. What they did to Esther, she and I went through the math, and we figured out that in the first 3 years, they overcharged her $52,000 beyond what a regular mortgage at the real rate of the value of the house would have been. $52,000 in 3 years. And needless to say, Esther hurt herself trying to work so hard that she could afford to keep that home, because it was so important. And they count on that. They count on you being attached to your home so that you'll spend every single cent you have trying to save it. And that's why it's considered a wealth stripping strategy. John? did you
No,
want-
I'm all set.
Okay, I want to just, I don't know if anybody's had any questions. Chad, has there been anybody raise their hand asking for a question? You have a question? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
If you can introduce yourself for the mic, that'd be great.
I touched that on the regulation. And we make one for them. And I would just like to know, also in this county, so, in addition to voting for you, John, what else? can, people in the community do to support? This incredible work.
It's a good point. Thank you for voting for me. I appreciate that.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, good, unmute. Okay. I hope people understand that I'm not technologically savvy. One of the things is to contact, it isn't just me. I mean, the representatives, the state senators, the governors, everybody. What frustrated me when this all started way back in this registry was the fact that I really thought when we saw what was happening and we exposed it, that I would have been pushed to the side. I wasn't doing this for publicity, and everyone else would have jumped in. The big guys, you know, they would have jumped in and run this football down the field. But there was silence. I mean, I was stunned. And I really believe, and I've said this 100 times, it's the banks. I mean, the lobbyists, the attorneys. I was surprised that the local attorneys who were involved in these closings didn't stand up, but they're hired by the banks to do closings. Everybody is on banks' payroll. I mean, you know, my frustration with public funding with private funding of some campaigns is the fact that you look at the amount of money that comes in from the lobbyists, from the attorneys, from the banks, from the lenders, from the real estate brokers. Nobody wants to go after the banks. They're too big to fail. Well, as I said 8 years ago, they're not too big to go to jail. And what bothers me is that if you record a mortgage and you sign a document and there's fraud on it and you created it, believe me, they're gonna drag you through the system. They're gonna expose you. You're gonna be in jail. The banks get away with it. And one of the interesting things, and I can tell you this I spoke at the Lynn City Council.
Oh, yes, when we were doing
And
that.
they were putting in a wonderful program, which they subsequently reneged on. But anyways, it was a great program that allowed people an opportunity to have meetings on their foreclosures and everything else. And there was a president of the St. Jean's Credit Union in the audience. And after I got through speaking and everyone else got through speaking, he stood up. And I said, oh, here it comes. This guy's a banker. And he said, I came here tonight to oppose this, but I'm in favor of it. He said, because everything he's saying is true. And he told us that a person in Lynn was trying to buy a house, went to the broker, went to the bank, went to a mortgage company, and said, you can buy this house. We're going to lend you all this money. And the person went to St. Jean's Credit Union and said, can you beat this deal? Can you get me a better interest rate? And he looked at all the papers and he said to her, wow, you do, you work here and you do very well in your catering business. And she said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, it says here you make, I believe the number, and I could be wrong, it was like $80,000 a year catering. She said, I don't know the catering business. I don't know what you're talking about. This is the truth. This is on record.
Yeah.
They forged that loan application
Yes, this was common and.
so they could send it. She was stunned. And this guy said, he's right. What they're doing. So what does that tell you? The person can't afford the house. They're giving them payments based on an additional $80,000 worth of income, which they don't have. They could care less because they take your mortgage and they bundle them all up and they give them the good housekeeping stamp of approval and they sell them. Right. And somewhere down the line, they're buying junk paper. And this is going on. And why this government did not stop this. I'll end it with this because I can talk forever and I don't want to, but if all the registries of deeds in this country did what we did, and we were the only ones who said, I'm not recording, we have 200 and something names of, we know are robo-signers, fraudulent people. If they stopped that in one day, this whole country would have stopped. Now, the banks would say, oh, Brian wants to destroy the economy. No, we want to help the economy. We want to get people. This isn't a mission to help some. If somebody goes in and they take a mortgage on their house and they have the income and everything else and they don't make the payments, that's one thing. Years ago, you sat across the table from the banker and the banker said, John, you make $45,000. You can't afford $300,000. You can afford $150,000. Well, you knew you could make that payment. Mm-hmm. But when you sit across from bankers now, or mortgage lenders, they tell you, oh, you can buy that house, the $700,000 house. Of course you can. We'll lower your rates. We'll buy your points down. We'll do this, just what they did to you. Mm-hmm. And it's a scam. And I have 2 years left in my term, and it's not going to happen here. I just hope it doesn't happen everywhere, that people do what we're doing. And I thank Grace, because the day I met her was wonderful. And I mean this, because I tell everybody, suddenly overnight, within a month, I was the expert in this country on mortgage fraud. And I said to somebody one day, I said, if I'm the expert, we're in bigger trouble than we think. And then I met people like Grace, and I met people who care. And it said, we're going to help you. We're going to help you fight this battle. And that's where we are today. And I'm hoping that the appeals court will use common sense and compassion and say, we got to fix this. We got to let this guy have his day with Esther in court.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Let me add a couple of things. In terms of people who are listening and in response to Doug's question, what else can you do? You can get involved. We've been asked by one of our big coalition partners, and I obviously could use some help making this happen, but people want to put into place what we had envisioned years ago, which is going to be an emergency response network. So that when somebody is facing an auction or an eviction local to you, and you may not be involved in this issue every day, that you will have a way to hook in and get notified, where to show up and when. The sharecroppers, when they were fighting the taking of homes in the South, this is what people did. They had networks and everybody showed up. And it will make the difference when they start showing up and there's 50, 100 people on the property. They're not going to be doing what they've been doing. So that is a very direct thing. Esther, you had something?
Yeah, Chris there.
Okay, yeah, there are a few hands up. Yes, go ahead.
I'll unmute Chris Lisinski first,
Mhm.
because he chatted about that.
Yep.
This is Chris Olszynski from the State House
Go
News
ahead,
Service.
Chris, ask your question.
Apologies, could someone just walk through a couple more background details on what the legal situation in Esther's case is today and exactly what Register O'Brien's seeking to do with his motion? I want to make sure I'm just following, the
Absolutely.
exact
So-
chain of legal events today.
Right. So Esther did something remarkable, which other homeowners who get information do, which is that when they went to actually try and auction her house off, she reached out, had a whole lot of people show up for the auction, but she also worked directly with the Mass Alliance Against Predatory Lending to put together an affidavit to put into the registry showing that the auction was going to be illegal. And of course, John recorded it like pronto in like a half hour so that she had the document. And so what happened was the auction got called off because she had put into the public record that it was going to be illegal if they tried to do anything. She's since been fighting in court with the what we refer to as a securitized trust. This is the banks putting their money into mortgages and then bundling them into what they call a trust and having investors pay for them so that they could pull their money back out and do it to the next person. These, as in Esther's case, these supposed securitized trusts don't actually legally exist. There is a registration process for them with the Security and Exchange Commission, and you can go right on and look there up Esther's supposed securitized trust and see that it doesn't even legally exist, but they've been doing this to literally millions of people. So Esther's been in land court trying to protect what she filed in the Registry of Deeds here with Register O'Brien's registry here in South Essex for 4 years now. 5 years. And so she's still pre-auction. A lot of the homeowners who are fighting post-auction because that's where most of the legal battle usually happens. But for the homeowners who've gotten the expertise to put an affidavit in the registry, and if they have, most of our registers are recording those legally like they're supposed to, those seem to scare off the illegal actions of the banks, at least for a few years while they fight to get that affidavit canceled in the registry. What happened was that Esther did a very eloquent argument, and actually, I think we even have it on tape, in front of the judge, not just about the illegal steps that have been taken since the mortgage was originated, but the mortgage itself as a predatory, therefore illegal document, and the discriminatory way in which it was given to her, again, as a woman of color and an immigrant. And the judge actually was kind of taken aback in land court, seemed to catch her breath for a minute. But when the decision came down, it doesn't even exist in the decision. She said, I didn't have to look at racism, sexism, or anti-immigrant anything. And that's not my job. And so she put down a decision to cancel the affidavit in the registry, which is the thing that Register O'Brien has refused to do and is asking to intervene instead, so that he can fulfill his legal obligation to equal protection of his constituents. And so that's where we are right now. He's filing today the request to do that because procedurally there was a decision made. Esther had 10 days to appeal that to the appeals court. So although nothing more has happened yet in the appeals court, the appeals court doesn't do the initial round of adjudicating something. So Registrar O'Brien is filing to them to allow him to then address directly to the land court.
The other, one of the other. We have to get turned on here. Okay, one of the other things is, that bothered me was that the land court is telling me, basically, if I'm correct, is the affidavit that she duly recorded here and that I recorded, which we will provide anyone a copy of that. If you want those affidavits today, we can get them to you, is you could take it off record. Well, my argument is she's making her case. I have 39,000 and at least another 50,000 that we haven't even found yet of fraudulent documents. And no court is telling me to take those off record, because that would be great. Those are all phony baloney documents. Why aren't we taking those off record? Am I right?
Absolutely.
But we're gonna take Esther's affidavit off, trying to save her home. And somebody can tell you, if somebody can show me that that's the right thing, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Why do the banks get a pass when the average person loses their home, their dignity and everything? It's wrong.
Let me add to that, one thing, Doug, that folks who are constituents of John's can do is that we're helping John find the affidavits that the banks have been putting in that were not affidavits. They're called them that, but they're not based on personal knowledge. The very affidavits, for instance, that the bank put in on Esther's record, they want her actually totally honest personal knowledge affidavit, whether they agree with the content or not. She swore to it. It's her personal word. She has a right to do that. I think last week, John put in an affidavit on the so-called affidavits that the banks had put in on Esther's record. So the public is now on notice that those are not affidavits, they're not legal, and they cannot be used as a basis to foreclose. And that's John taking the action that he can take to alert the world that those are not legal recorded documents in his registry. So one of the things folks can do is help John find all those documents and prepare what he needs to be able to mark them in his registry so the public will know that those are not legally recorded documents. There are other hands up, Chad?
Yeah, there was someone in chat, Elenice, so I'll ask.
Is it a question, Elenice?
Raise her hand here.
I know, but we're not doing comments. So Elenice, if you got a question, where are you? Sorry.
Grace?
Fine people here. Okay, you're off mute, I believe, Elenice.
Yep.
Yes,
Oh, my fault. Go ahead, say it again.
I just would like to convey something to Register Brian. We thank you for doing that today. It's extremely important. I myself have learned a little bit from predatory lending from Grace. And being an immigrant, we really believe in the law, in the ruling of law, but the courts are taking upon themselves to be the law and completely disregarding the way mortgages are recorded, in which Grace have taught me about assignment. It doesn't matter if a bank merged with another bank and now it got the access from another bank. So when it's time to record locally, even the Secretary of State is involved, and he could be involved. And if he avoid, I think it's something that could be done about the Secretary of State. So the courts have to understand they don't get a power to drag people to court and take their property by force. And I think it's a great thing that people understand exactly. And Ms. O'Brien, maybe explain to the people that you are understanding about an assignment. If an assignment of mortgage wasn't recorded properly, as Grace said, the affidavit is not recorded properly, it has no effect or can't be enforced in court. And I guess this is one thing that we need to.
Yeah, let me,
Yeah, can I?
yeah,
How do I do this? Here we go. You're correct. And one thing that you made a very good point. I used to be able to, and I've been here since 1976. So I used to be able to tell people, look them in the eye and say, this bank owns your mortgage. Well, that all stopped when banks and Wall Street got married and created this monster. I can't tell people who owns their mortgage. Guess what? Your original lender can't tell you either half the time. They don't know because they've sold them, they've sold them, they've sold them, and they've sold them. And
they don't exist half the time.
and they don't exist. And one of the interesting things is years ago, a bank has a right to sell your mortgage. And some banks did many years ago, they'd transfer it, but they recorded an assignment at the registry of deeds. The reason we have registries is so that you have a total paper trail of everything pertaining to your house, to your property. So when the assignment was recorded, you came in, we'd say, yeah, oh yeah, Bank of New England sold it to, Bank of America. Okay, here it is. Here's the 2 pieces of paper. That doesn't exist anymore.
Mhm.
And they've cost, and this is where people don't understand, the revenue that we've lost by them not recording these assignments is in the multi-millions of dollars across the country. And it's my opinion, and I'm gonna say this because this is my opportunity and my soapbox to say this. And I try to get my colleagues, registers of deeds around this country to understand it. I think you will see the day that these banks are trying to eliminate registries of deeds.
Oh, they are.
They want to create one massive database. And they'll control, and no one will know what in God's name they're doing. And these guys and women who are registers have to understand this.
It's actually, we're very close to that already.
And with MERS and with all of these groups that are running around out there, the New York Stock Exchange, Simplify, all these companies, it's all electronic now. It's all in the cloud. It's all everywhere. So that little registries like this down the road will be put out of business.
Well,
And there's a reason they want to put us out of business. Because we at least are showing people what they're doing is wrong, illegal, morally wrong, legally wrong, and they want to eliminate that. And for financially, it's all about the money.
okay, let me,
That's it.
thank you. No, that's great, John. It's great. So let me just, I think there was one more hand up, Chad.
You give Deborah Hanley,
Uh-huh,
or you her.
okay.
Hi.
Deborah, you're up.
Yes.
You have a
Hi,
question?
everyone.
You're muted on your end or something. Why are we not hearing her?
I'm unmuted.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. This has been a great program, and it's reinforcing my belief that something is being done, about this problem. The one issue I would like to raise is the fact that the mortgage servicing companies really play a big role in when the tipping point occurs, meaning first, there's no dealing with them. And secondly, there's all kinds of ways that they con and, change documents and raise your interest rate like a point within 2 months. But that's who turned me over, into foreclosure. And even though some of the very large ones like Nation Star, has been sued in multiple class action lawsuits, their behavior is still the same. They're paying out like millions and millions and millions of dollars. They're being told you have to respect the rule of RESPA, all right? And they just keep right on doing what they're doing.
Did you have a question, Deborah, or?
Well, it's more of a comment, me, Grace. Okay, but I can talk too forever, so I'll be quiet at this point.
Well, let me
Well,
just-
what can we do about it?
Right, let me
That's the
backtrack.
question.
Yeah, let me
go ahead.
backtrack off of that comment a little bit. And John had said this thing about you went to a local bank years ago and you got a mortgage, but I remind folks that was the experience of white male citizens and not, unfortunately, other folks, as we now know historically. I'm sharing with you the graph that I found most alarming and informative. For those of you who are online, I apologize to those of you who are here, you can't see it, but this is the graph. The Federal Reserve Bank tracks over 600 economic indicators over time, trying to guess where the economy is headed. And this is a graph comparing the cost to rent versus the cost to own. And historically, that I believe has been tracked since 1948. And this is what happened in the early 2000s. You can see in 2001, it kind of hit the peak of where it had ever been, the ratio before, and then it just took off. And that wasn't a fluke. And so while most homeowners experience things the way Deb did, that she was doing fine until she hit a bump in the road and she needed a loan mod and they wouldn't talk to her. The reality is that the way that this was done was to overprice the homes for people. And that's where the housing bubble came from historically, was that lender, and we have members who got mortgages in the early 2000s and even in the late 1990s, they would get called by some now out of business Option One, AmeriQuest, that whole slew of illegal players, and told, hey, we can get you a better mortgage, you know, why don't you remortgage with us? And people would be told, oh, you're getting this great deal. Then they would have the appraisers on speed dial, and they'd call them and they'd say, hey, you know, Maggie is in a position to get a new mortgage. She's got a crappy one. Why don't you go out there and appraise the place for 20,000 more than it was? So the bubble didn't happen on one property. It was created by one property going up 10,000 because they were making more money per dollar you spent, and then the next property down the street. So if you had lived in a neighborhood where there was a lot of lending going on, which is why the gateway cities, as they were called, got creamed, because they were financially up and coming in the around 2000 and into the early 2000s. And that's where all these mortgages were turning over and turning over and turning over. And every time they went out to give someone a new mortgage in the neighborhood, they went up another 10 or 20,000. And that's where we get a historic bubble in housing prices that has never occurred before in the history of the United States. So while people experience the problem as being when they first couldn't pay the mortgage, the problem was created to set them up so they would not be able to pay the mortgage. And there's a ton of folks who are still in the pipeline paying on overpriced predatory mortgages that they really should not be paying on, because they're illegal and immoral and destroying our economy. And it's the reason why local neighborhoods don't have the money for a local coffee shop anymore, because everybody's paying on an overpriced mortgage. And that is destroying our economy across the board, whether somebody is foreclosed or not. I did the math at one point for what I saw as an average predatory loan versus what it would have been if it had been a regular loan. Historically, a traditional mortgage, again, white male citizens got, would pay maybe 2.25 times the value of the house over the life of a 30-year loan. Predatory loans, and there are a lot of people out there still paying in Massachusetts who haven't hit a bump in the road, Deb, like you did, may pay 6 times the value of the house over the life of the loan. And that is destroying our economy, because what we know, and I'm backing what John said here, part of the reason that home ownership has played such a critical role in the US is because it has leveled the playing field, and it has created a way for everybody to equally participate. And when you give out loans, not only was which is why MAAPL started partly, we predicted the international market crash, because we knew it was coming, because we knew it was all these mortgages that they were foreclosing, and somehow the banks thought you could foreclose tons of mortgages at once and not crash the world economy. But it tells you the bug juice they were drinking is better than anything I've ever gotten. Anyway, the upshot of it is that even today, we are still seeing massive wealth stripping from the average US resident, and way worse in communities of color and working class communities in general. This is why it is directly related to the economy going south again now, because if regular people just have a regular amount of money to spend in their regular local community, that is what drives a healthy economy, and nothing they do, the Fed or anybody else, can make up for that. I wanted to, there's a question here in the room. Go ahead.
For me?
Yeah.
Vital Rosa, Merrimack, and Wayne and Elmore. So first I have a comment. So they had bailouts for the banks. The government gets bailed out all the time. They can go into debt all the time, raise taxes. Now they're talking about students getting bailed out on student loans, which they should do like normal people do, file bankruptcy if you can afford to pay it, right? When
Can't use it for that.
When will the bailouts come for homeowners that are having a hard time, and many of them being homeless and losing their homes and all this stuff. Now, I have a question on the affidavits. The affidavits that the bank, or their attorneys files on the foreclosure that Grace was talking about, most of them are invalid or, not truthful. Is there a way that we can block them from being recorded, or a way that we can challenge it? Maybe doing some type of deposition of the one that's attached to the true affidavit, and then file an affidavit post that saying that that affidavit is invalid.
So most of you can tell that your affidavit, that the assignments are no good or the affidavits are no good by knowing what to look for. And you have a legal right in Massachusetts, and this is what Register O'Brien does, which is to record an affidavit, has to be on personal knowledge, in the Registry of Deeds. And that's part of what he's been doing here and what most of the registers across the state do. But as some of you know, you have registers who are not following that law and allowing you to record. But that is what Esther did to stop the auction 6 years ago now, and has helped keep her in her house. And we've probably got, oh, I don't know, at least a dozen folks who did it, who literally have bought themselves 5 years and counting. So those affidavits are very powerful and make a real difference in people's lives.
We enthusiastically record them here.
No, I have one.
Yeah, I mean, if they come down here, we will record them. We'll help people.
So my point was a little bit about challenging theirs on the record. Like they put an affidavit in, and then you can challenge it, the homeowner can challenge it and file his own affidavit that, under that decision, they didn't have any personal knowledge or whatever the law is. I'm just wondering if you could do that, to build on the public.
I don't know, I think
You've done some of them.
yeah, but this is what the land court is saying, take them off,
So the issue here is not that John's not willing to do everything, and he's just amazing, really believes in you guys, in justice, in what's right. Sorry, thank you. As you know, it's an avalanche of documents, and so John's willing to do what's right. But as any of you who've done legal cases, and I know a number of you have here, it's all in the documents. It has to get written up right. You have to have your evidence right. And that's what John needs to be able to record something. So again, for those of you who work with me all the time, I'm putting out my plea again. If we get more administrative help, we can really go to town on this stuff. And the thing to remember is not only is John standing up for equal protection for all of you in his registry, but when he does it, because of the way our laws exist as to equal treatment, he is setting a standard that we are then going to be able to turn to other registers and say, it can't matter whether I live in South Essex or not. The laws are the same. So when he creates a model, it literally gives us leverage to go to other registers and say, if any registry can do this, then you can do it for me. And I'm supposed to have the same rights, whether I live in Worcester or Plymouth or Norfolk or Western Mass. No, it's not just reciprocity, it's equal protection. You have the same rights under the same law, no matter where you live. And if he shows what can be done, then we can show it to other registers. So it has a very big impact, and it's why I'm constantly pleading for more help, because it's literally the number of hours you can spend in a day to write things up in the right format so that they're reportable. I think that's pretty much it. I wanted to share just quickly for any media that is still on, a couple of, hold on a second, a couple of images that I feel like it's important. I've got to figure out how to, there we go. Got it. This is the map of where the foreclosures were in 2007. And you can see the clustering around the areas of the state that were our higher density communities of color and as I was saying, the gateway cities that were up and coming at the time when this massive scam was in the heyday. And unfortunately, we expect to see the same thing as they spike again. It's still these communities, we're still looking primarily at mortgages that were originated in the mid 2000s, first decade of the century. And that is where the foreclosures were. Another way to look at this is to look at the what happened when the bubble burst. And hold on a second. When the bubble burst, this map shows you where the market crashed the most. And if you've understood what I was saying about the bubble being the driving force for foreclosures and the bubble being created by predatory lenders, you can see how the crash reflected where the bubble was the worst. And this corridor, unfortunately, in the north, you're looking at your district, right? It's one of the big purple patches, one of the worst hit areas. And there's actually a zip code in Lynn where the average property value fell 66%. And so unfortunately, this is also where we're gonna be seeing again the impact as the foreclosures return. And it means John's in a position to make justice.
Did you see Jim's comments?
No, I didn't.
That also happened in the nineties, the mid-90s, when they had the Resolution Trust Corporation. Same thing, land was, houses boarded up all over.
Yes, and nothing compared to this crisis. Unfortunately, we've surpassed them. By the time we had paid attention in 2007, we were long past.
Jim says he has a graph showing the current bubble, which is twice the size of 2008. You want him to show it?
Yes, I'm allowing him to do it, but others, please respect not grabbing the screen. If Jim, can you show it? Because
Sure.
otherwise I'm gonna close us down. No, the banks, they're admitting that there's a huge bubble happening and and that there's going to be a bunch of foreclosures, but their answer is yeah, there's the takeoff. Their answer is that it's all going to just clear the back inventory of quote bad loans, and that it doesn't really mean anything, that we're seeing a spike right now. And of course it does. So I'm inclined to close this out. If you want to let the screen come back to us, Jim, thank you for sharing that.
One final thing. The thing with modifications that we talked about earlier, we haven't heard about modifications for.
Yes, but remember that modifications were not giving people justice. So the problem here is that until we get real modifications, understand, and this is where our fight is and why it's such an honor to work with the Register. What he's filing in the appeals court is extraordinary. And anybody who has the patience to read, I encourage you to read what he's filing. The loan modifications, when we get to justice, and as you can tell, we've turned the corner and we just got to keep the pressure on. Modifications literally, and you know this, have to start by writing down the value of the mortgage to the real property value. And until that happens, most loan modifications are just extending the pain that people are being forced to overpay on something that is and we're honored here by having Mr. Tommy Morris with us today, whose SJC case and his own argument at the SJC brought us the win that has told the courts they have to look at the origination of mortgages. We'll see if they follow what the SJC told them to do. But what we know is that when they start looking at those originations, the legal documents actually require them, and they've not been doing it, to modify the loan down to what was a real value of the property and a real affordable loan. And that's in your loan documents. So when we get to justice on these originations, you're going to start seeing something very powerful happen.
The next thing they're supposed to do is lower the interest rate.
but they've been lowering interest rates. That in and of itself doesn't get us where we need to go, because if you've got, like, if you're in Esther's situation where they gave you a mortgage for $200,000 more than the house was worth, you can lower the interest rate as much as you want on that. Real justice comes by lowering the principals. Anyway, we have much more to learn and much farther to go, but I want to thank everybody for participating. Appreciate the media who was able to show up at last minute notice. And what we'll do is post this Zoom on the MAAPL website. We'll post John's filings on the website so that people can see them. I'll discuss with Esther if there's anything of hers she wants to share, and we'll create a folder for people to get that information. I'll put up the maps there too for people who want them. Is there any other closing question that we've got? No, John, do you want
I
to?
have a
One
question.
thing, the banks always say bad loans.
Hold on.
We.
Hold on.
No, that's okay.
We got to get,
Oh, you gotta get me on.
Yeah. Get that?
You know,
All right.
I don't have it.
I'll send them.
There it is.
All right,
There
there
we
you go.
the banks always talk about bad loans, bad loans. We didn't make the bad loans. They did. They made the bad loans.
Bible says don't borrow.
They created this, so,
Yeah.
but
Yes,
anyways.
so, and our new motto for those of you who do talk about this issue is that people
You-
people didn't buy too much house, they got scammed into too much debt. Thank you, everybody,
you
for
all.
coming.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Thank you, everybody.